Hey everyone, welcome back to DevSheds. So in the last session, Paul just quickly ran through setting up a new project with CodeCatalyst, and we also invited me to that particular project as well. So I'm in the project here. I can now work with Paul. If I click on the project itself, I will go into the main CodeCatalyst view for this project. And as he invited me as a project administrator, very fancy title, thank you, Paul, I can actually create issues if I go to the issues board. So going in and creating an issue, I'm going to get Paul to fix a very noticeable bug within our to-do app. And I'm going to call this highly visible bug. You know what it is.
Yeah, I know.
So there we go. I can set a status. It is just going to stay in to do. I'll let Paul change that status. This is a super high priority. I can add some labels and some custom fields. But most importantly, because I'm collaborating with Paul, I'm going to add him onto the ticket as the assignee. So that appears within the to-do swim lane. And of course, I could do a lot here, right? Like I could set this up how my team works. I can create additional swim lanes. I can create a backlog. There's a whole bunch of settings that you can do. I can change the way that I do estimations on projects. So you can see it's all super highly configurable here, right? It's super easy to change and add statuses in and work out how your team wants to work in an agile way. So if we go back to Paul's screen, he can take you through what this looks like on his side. And he's going to start hacking away to fix this particular bug. So he's going to show you how easy it is to jump from receiving something on the issues board to then jumping in, cloning some code, and starting to work away on that code. So I'll hand back to you, Paul.
Back to my view, and I've come in here as a developer. I've gone into our issues board, and I've seen there's this highly visible bug, and that I know what it is. Now, I'm a little more finicky around what I see in my issues board here. So, I'm going to add I'm going to add a label to that, and I'm just going to call it front. And we know there's front end and back end pieces of this application. Maybe I want to do some reporting a little bit later on. So you can see just how easy it is to go ahead and create labels. And the same for, the custom fields you want to do, like really easy to go ahead and do that. Now, when we created the project, we saw that a code repository was created and that blueprint was injected in. When we go to the source repositories that are attached to this specific project, we can see that to-do app has been created as I specified. And if I go ahead and I load that, we can see that the interface is, I guess, basically like what we're pretty much used to seeing when we work with a Git repository. There's a folder listing. We can see some activity. Each of those commits, you can look at that commit history and see what has gone in and out as part of that commit history. You'll see the changes in the diffs. Obviously, this was the initial commit, so it's going to be a big one. A lot of just initial commits here, and as well as those specific files. So let's just say I wanted to do some editing directly in the browser. So it was just a quick edit. I could go ahead and do that edit. That would perform a commit on my behalf as well. So similar to what we've seen in other GitHub tooling applications.
So that's actually pretty cool because I know sometimes you just want to change something really quick on the fly, but there's other times where I'll have product managers or program managers work with me, and they might not be editing code, but they want to build out the README files, right? So yeah. You can collaborate with people that don't have to be exactly hands-on with the code, but still want to contribute to the core base of the project.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, when we typically interact and work with like Git repositories, we authenticate ourselves, either that be with like an SSH key or some mechanism to identify that it's me that has access to this code repository. We're going to see how CodeCatalyst has taken away that heavy lifting. And what we're going to do is I want to go ahead and I want to edit and work on some of this specific code here. So I'm going to change something in the front end, but I'm going to do that with using a dev environment. So what we will do here is I'm kind of partial to Visual Studio Code. So I want to use Visual Studio Code to edit this code so that I can use any piece of tooling that I have locally and also preview and see what that app looks like running it locally on my machine. But I don't want the hassles of installing like Node or any of the other dependencies that might be required for this application. And I'll show you some of the magic that happens behind the scenes here. if we go ahead and select Visual Studio Code. Now, obviously, when, as a developer, we want to, well, I guess typically we'd work in a new branch unless we were, a little bit like pro and very confident that our code was going to work. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work in a new branch. I'm going to say, I'm going to call that like fix big bug.
I still like working in a separate branch, so I kind of have a strategy of feature branches, right? That way, when I do a merge, I'm merging everything rather than kind of like incrementally fighting with other developers that are merging into the same branch as me. We can do merges when the feature is finished, right? Each.
Yeah, exactly right. And where do we create that branch from? We're going to pick main. There's only one branch here, so that's what it's going to be. And if we wanted to some sort of alias so that we could like identify that a little clearly, I'm just going to call the alias for this that big bug. So if I had to reference that later, you can see here that there's the dev environment configuration. We can go ahead and we can change that if we needed to. But in this environment here, with the free tier, this is typically attached to the free tier, so you get a number of minutes or hours to run within the free tier. You can pick larger dev environments that will provide you more performance depending on what you require. And that will require you to change the billing method for the specific project. We can look at that later. But I'm going to go ahead and create that space. I put a space in there. That's my fault. So you can see that, it sort of helps you not make mistakes, really. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create that development environment. Now, what's happening is in the background, that's spinning up an environment that's hosted within AWS, but will allow direct connection from Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go ahead and allow that. And then I'm going to change my screen share to show what that looks like. So we can see that there's this specific app now has connected. And I'm looking at that specific set of code. Now, what has happened here is that a developer environment has been provisioned, within CodeCatalyst that exists. However, the code is available completely locally and feels local to me as the developer working on this application. If I go ahead and open a new terminal, and I'll, let's just type like, who am I? We can see that like this is a specific user. So this isn't me on my, on my MacBook interacting with this code, but this is me as Paul Kukiel's builder ID interacting with the developer environment that has automatically pulled down that code.
And so this is basically SSH'd into that instance you set up before, right? But as a developer, it looks exactly like it is our VS Code, just connected completely remotely.
Correct. That's right. So there's a secure connection, but you don't need to manage or figure out SSH keys or anything like that. That's all sort of handled for you. So, I mean, look, you can see here that it says SSH, but that is all handled by the VS Code AWS toolset plugin. And so there's a secure connection between like my machine and the machine that's hosting the dev environment, and that code has been pulled into that dev environment. And
you can share extensions as well, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So now I've got everything that I expect to have like in my local environment that I'd like to use, all those tools, but I've got that running in an environment that's exactly the same. So I know that when I start working on this piece of code, the environment is going to be exactly the same as when Matt goes ahead and fixes the bug that I'm going to build for him.
Yeah.
Now, I'll build a bug for Matt. I think I'll find a bug that Matt can fix rather than build a bug for Matt. Okay, so I'm going to CD into the front end of this application because we're just going to look at something maybe that's on the front end of this. Because this is a React application, I know that I'm going to need to install some dependencies to go ahead and run that. So I'll just install that. We'll have just a quick look at what this, what this package looks like. All our packages and dependencies are installed there. And we can see that there's, it's got React here that's sitting here, and there's a number of specific scripts here. So we should be able to run those applications if we need to, run the scripts as we need to. So, the tests. So if we did, run test, we should see that those unit tests will go ahead and run. NPM. So while the tests are running, as we know, that'll take a minute or so to happen. We'll have a look at maybe in the source code. We'll look at the application itself, and we'll think about, we'll find something that we're going to go ahead and change. So there might be the title here. Maybe we'll look for where we could change the title. Here's to-do list. So when we see this text to-do list, we'll just add an extra line in here, dev shed. I've made some change to my code, which was just to change that title, which was the part of the bug that Matt has said. I knew before my tests had run that my tests were working, that everything was passing. Has this change broken anything? We'll go ahead and we'll run those tests again. So first off, we'll make sure that our unit tests work. We'll shift that, all of that responsibility left as far as possible. And I can see, yes, it still works again at this point. But as a developer, I want to make sure that it works properly. So how do I go ahead and run that application? So even though this code is remotely, I can still run npm run start and view what that looks like running on my local machine. So I can do, hot reloads and see what that application is going to go ahead and look like. So I'm going to go ahead and run npm run start. And then you will see that development environment will start up. And we'll see in just a second, because I'll switch the screens over, that
you can actually show that it's a proxy. You can see it in the SSH settings. You can see that it creates a proxy to your computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that development environment is starting up. If we flip back, it'll just take a second for that environment to warm up. And Matt sort of pointed out that, and we'll kind of look at this a little bit, that, I guess what this is doing is setting up a proxy tunnel that enables, when I look at localhost port 3000, that's traversing all the way back through over that secure connection and seeing what is being run on that server itself. So as I don't need to be taking resource of my machine to run, this dev server, for example, but the experience feels like I'm operating exactly on my local machine to build these, my front-end application. We can see here that to-do list dev shed has changed. And I think this is set up for hot reloading. So I'll quickly go back and I'll find that exact line of code and change something. And we'll see how quick that we can see that. So I've literally just gone and now saved that line of code. And you can see the hot reloading has taken over, and it said, I've called it devshed2, and the title has changed. So the development cycle locally is just as fast as we expect to be running local. However, I haven't had to set up or install any dependency on my machine. I know that any of those dependencies will run the same in the build environment because I'm not using a different architecture or something that's different locally.
Yeah, you're actually using Amazon Linux here right behind the scenes, and so it's going to match exactly what you roll out to.
Yeah, correct. That's exactly right, Matt. So I'll switch back to that, to my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we're back into my application. So Matt, you said you saw. So here we go. So this is what we're seeing in the browser. I don't know what. Maybe if we look through logs, we'd see what is exactly going on there. How it does.
If you actually switch to the ports tab, it actually shows you the proxy mapping for the tunnel. So yeah, just the next one over. Oh, okay. So you can actually change from localhost 3000 to another port if you're running something else locally too.
Okay. So I guess this is doing SSH tunneling here is probably what it's doing for us, and a nice little interface to do that. So yeah, nice feature there, Matt. Thanks. So now that I have made that specific change, I'm not going to change my lock file or coverage or JUnit, the outputs of that. I'm just going to go ahead and add this file. So so one of the things you might have noticed is that I haven't authenticated myself as some user of Git. I've just been able to use Git by default and seen what's, I haven't had to do any extra work to set up my Git SSH keys or credentials or anything like that. But this is operating Git as the builder ID that we signed up as, because I was logged into Visual Studio Code and I created that dev environment and I opened that dev environment as my logged in user as that builder ID. I have the credentials for that there exactly. So If that piece of code is now committed, we will go back into the console, have a look at what that looks like, and show you the outcome of that. Okay, so that that specific requirement piece of code has been pushed in that new branch. If we looked into our source repository, we would be able to see that now in that specific repository, we should see an additional branch. So yeah, we can go ahead here and see fix big bug. So there's an additional branch there. And let's just quickly take a look at that and see what that is. So as you can see, that's my builder ID. It's identified me as Paul K. I fixed Matt's bug, which was just that one specific file. As with any application, I know that works because our unit test passed. We've tested it locally. In this example, we only have one environment, so we're not going to do testing in a different environment. We're going to go ahead and create a pull request, and I'm going to pick my source branch as fix the bug, my destination branch back in main, the pull request title, and now I could link that specifically to the issue, which we will go ahead and do. So that's the highly visible bug there. So I'm just going to copy that. Now this is good for tracking so that we can see that specific issue is directly linked to that that commit in the code, and we can provide our pull request title as well as our description if we want to do that. If we want to do optional or required reviewers, we can go ahead and specify those in so we can have a code review. Maybe we'll set Matt up as a reviewer so we can show what that looks like. But this also provides a bit of a diff on the change. We can see here that that's what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and click create. And then we'll just quickly switch to Matt's side so we can have a look at what that review looks like. And then Matt will be able to merge that in, and that will be the end of this segment.
Excellent. So on my screen, I'm still in that issues tab, but I'm going to go over and I'm going to have a look at the code. So I'm going to have a look at the pull request section, and I can see Paul's pull request is sitting in here. And this is fantastic because colleagues can look at the changes that I've made. They can make some recommendations around the code. If I look at the changes here, I can create commentary, right? So I can say, good job. Did you want to use styling? I can leave some extra comments, and me and Paul could go back and forth and fix a few extra things. But, I've decided I'm actually not going to be that fussy. So I'm just going to say, good job. I think this is good to go. And so I can save that comment there, let Paul know. And I can also go to approve. And I'll just say, great work.
So kind, Matt.
Looks good to me, LGTM or whatever it is. And at this point, Paul could, on his side, merge it, or I can merge it as well. So you can have some ruling around having multiple people review the code before a merge happens. You can also have things like CodeGuru or some of the automated code scanning tools as well, potentially help you out as users here, making code recommendations before you do that final merge. So I will merge this off. And I will just do a fast forward merge. I can do a squasher merge as well. So you can have different strategies depending on what you're trying to do here. I'm going to clean up that branch as well. So I can actually shut down the branch that Paul used for that feature. It's no longer needed. The feature's done. So I can go ahead and get this all merged. Perfect. A source branch is deleted. And if I go back to main, and I look at the commits on main, I can see that Paul fixed that bug, and we did that commit 5 minutes ago, and it is now part of the main branch. So that's fantastic. The other thing that Paul might want to do is he might want to get a little bit of a dopamine hit. He has finished this task, so if he wanted to, he can drag it to done. And he's successfully delivered a feature for the day. So good job, Paul. Next, we are going to show you a few other things, around pipelines for CodeCatalyst. So stay with us.